Okay.
Friday, I just sat down. Yeah.
Right.
I've got it.
So we're on now. So ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, an assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe, and especially today, wherever you are in this big wide world, it's morning where I am. We have Worldwide Story Round, hosted by none other than Get a Word in Edgway's very own Mike Rust. Over to you, Mike.
Well, John, thank you very much. It's every time you say that, and my head gets a little bit bigger every time. I'm going to get to a point where I won't be able to walk through a door. I'm going to be so famous just because of the words that you tell about me once a fortnight, and I believe. Okay, so it is lovely being introduced by one of the best poets that I know, whose feet is firmly in the ground, and his poetry comes from his heart. Thank you very much, John. So here we are again. There's only a few of us here. So I was just talking to Baba a few seconds ago, and he said, you're bound to tell a story, right? And he is. Now, one of the things that did happen to me when I was in Marrakesh, joined that very select 101 storytellers from 33 different countries, where we got our certificates for the Guinness Book of Records, was Rachel Smith and Nakarika, who do the personal stories. Now, I've never really done many personal stories in my life. I've always been the one ever since I was in my early 20s. I was 23, 24 when I went and started getting the traditional British ones. But just recently, I do think that there is a way forward and into the storytelling. I think it's a door that opens out for new people to come into what we do. So I'm going to start off with a personal one. Then I'm going to go to Keith, who I'm sure has got a story all lined up, ready to go and everything else. And Baba, who I'm sure hasn't got a story that's all lined up and ready to go, but I'm sure he will find something that something comes out of the ethos and comes. And then we'll finish up with a bit of luck. If John, I know you are probably on an island in Toronto where it's beautiful this time of year. I'm told I've never been there because all the trees, the colours and everything else. So when we finish the festival this year, everybody else, you want everybody to come on a Friday, and about 5, 6 o'clock on the Sunday evening, you want everybody to go home again. Because if anybody who hangs around, they're normally trouble of some kind. So we try to encourage everybody to leave on the Sunday night, and everybody does. And we run up to those of you who haven't been here. We have the accommodation in a place called Stokes's Barn. And at Stokes's Barn, we put up, and there's been a great big party up there, and I had a little cottage down in the town. So I went up there Monday morning, and they've got to leave by 10 o'clock or I get charged an extra day. But fine, everybody is gone. And Simone's up there. She's looking a bit knackered, but she's off home for a couple of days with her boyfriend and everything else. So there's one left over, and her name is Gispina. And Gispina, she comes from Greece. And she lives on a little island called Syros. And she's come over, and she's a wonderful storyteller and beautiful and good looking and talented and everything else. And she's staying to the Friday, because on Friday, while she was over there, she'd organised herself a gig with Amy over in Bishop's Castle, which is, half an hour's drive from where I live. So she's going to do the story to come. And she'd arranged for accommodation, which is in Amy's shed. Now, Amy's shed isn't quite a garden shed. When you go into it, it's basically a library with an internet connection and a bed, and a toilet, to be fair, but not much else. And so Despina is staying there for the whole week. Now, for her, she lives on a Greek island, and I've never been to one of those, even though I have been invited now. But it's a bit ungreen, I think is probably the way to do it. And you can see the sea at every opportunity. Everywhere you go, you can see the sea. That's what she told me. Anyway, she's here in Shropshire. Now, the spring here, the autumn here has been absolutely beautiful. It's the way that the climate has gone and everything else. All the trees are colours. There's every different colour of brown you can think of. The bracken and the acers and the chestnuts and all those. It is Shropshire at its absolute best. And it's a gentle autumn as well. There's no sort of the winds and storms. They haven't come yet, touch wood. And we've had 2 weeks, and this week in particular has been beautiful. But Amy did say to me she had some work to do on the Wednesday at 8 o'clock in the morning, and she wasn't back to 5 o'clock. And could I help out? So I happily went over and I picked Jaspina up, and we went down to the old marketplace town of Ludlow. Now, Lynn came down with Hattie and we had a walk around. We stopped at Stokesay Castle, which it's not very old, Baba. It's only been there since about the 1300s, something along those lines, you know. It's not old, it's just getting on a bit, right, really. So then we did that and we went into Ludlow, and Ludlow on a Wednesday, it's quintessentially English medieval town. It's got a market. It's had a market since 12 something or other, like all the other places around here. And the market's a modern day market. It's got a nice, you know, vegetables, and there's always somebody there who's going to give you a deal. Everybody likes a deal. So we went to lunch. Then we went down to the river, and the salmon are at the moment on the team, and there's a weir. And when you sit there on the weir, you can see the salmon leaping. So, and everything's fine and all good. So we come. Like I said, we had a really nice lunch. So Lynn wanted to go straight back, so she jumps in her little car and goes back. And it's my job now to take Jaspina from Ludlow back up to Bishop's Castle. And I didn't want to go. We call it laning it. So I didn't actually want to go up the main roads and things. So we went. Now, a proper Shropshire lane is only when both hedges are touching the car at the same time and there's green down the middle. That's a proper Shropshire lane. Everything else is a road. So we wind our way back. We found a castle. It's easier enough to do in Shropshire. There's hundreds of the bloody things scattered all over the countryside. We go and we end up in Clun. And I asked the question because I've got pretty certain she knew what I was going to ask. But I thought we better do it over there because there's a very famous pub in Clun, and it's called the Sun Inn. The Sun Inn has been written down by poetry. Clun has been written in poetry by Houseman, and the Sun Inn is very, very famous. And it's associated with these words, where there's Clungunford and Clunton, Clunbury and Clun, four of the quietest places under the sun. And at 5 o'clock in the evening, the pub is going to be reasonably quiet. All that's going to happen is a few guys are going to come in on the way home from work. Would you care to pop into that, says I. And yes, she would, she says. I've got nothing to do for an hour. Why don't we go and stop at a quintessentially English pub? It's been there hundreds of years. It's got black and white. It's got a fireplace. It's got a good-looking barmaid. It's got all the things you need when you go into a pub. So we went into a pub. What would you care for a drink? And she has half a pint of Guinness. Now, they don't do Guinness. So they've got an alternative over here because there's always an alternative, but they're one of the pubs that do Murphy's. So she had that, and I had a pint of beer. And there's a nice couple of people down there. And suddenly, my mates turn up. But there's Bear and there's Reese. There's one or two others. And these people come in, and they've got a great big hound dog. And they sit down, and we're all chatting away and everything else. Now, Jaspina's absolute English is 100%. But whether she can get 100% of us talking proper Shropshire, I don't know. But she looked as if she was understanding most of the conversation. And we didn't talk about football or cricket, honest. We didn't do that to her. Anyway, so we came on feeling a bit peckish. So I thought I would introduce her to a Shropshire delicacy. Something that she could talk about when she got home, and she could say to her children, and in 100 years' time, her family could say she'd gone to the Sun Inn Clun and had something that Shropshire are really proud about. So I gave her a packet of crisps, a pickled onion, and some scratchings. And I had the same. Now, I can see in them here, Keith and John Rowe both smiling, and Baba's just shaking his head. So at some point, I'll do the same to you, and when you could come along. But I had a packet of, we put scratchings on the table, and this dog looked at the scratchings. And she had a packet of crisps and a pickled onion, and she did this. I don't know, I can describe it for people who are only listening. She looked at mine, she looked at hers, and she looked at the dog. And she thought we were playing. She actually thought that what we were doing was giving her something that the dog would only eat. And it wasn't for human beings. I'm absolutely sure by the look of fear in the back of her eyes that she was thinking she might actually have to eat this stuff. Anyway, So I looked at her, and Dean, who's ex-military, he was the husband to the barmaid. He looked and he smiled and he went, "Give me one." So she had one, and so he and I, we started eating away, and we had some scratchings and a pickled egg, and then she knows, because we're not looking at her, she knows she's got to try it. And so she took a bite of the pickled egg and some crisps, and her face was an absolute picture. I can't quite describe it, but I'm 100% certain she is never going to eat that again, ever, for the whole of her life. Right. She put it down gently on the table, picked up the scratchings, the same look came straight across her face, and she gave a little, because the dogs do eat scratching. They're very salty, and if you're going to give pets and dogs scratchings, you've got to you drink them with beer, so they've got to have a glass of water, a bowl of water as well. So she did give anyone. The dog went, and his name was Hugo. He went and he had a drink. So after an hour or so, like I said, we all sat round. I popped her back, and off I went back home. And I saw her that Friday night, and she looked at me sideways again, and she's looking round, and she's not going to mention it. You could see in the back of her eyes, when Blast goes on, it's the Shropshire Storytelling Club that Amy does. What they do is some of the nicest cakes you've ever seen in your life. Absolutely. They are beautiful. And they have cups of tea, and they have a bottle of beer. So Lynn and I went over, and there's everybody sat there, and all was good. And so I can't wait to hear again. So at some point, I thought I'd tell you that, because I know tonight she is on an aeroplane going over Europe. She's probably just got to the top of the Alps by now, on her way back home, and she's going to settle into Athens. And then for her, she has a little ferry. She goes to Seros, and she's been over here with us probably 8, 9, 11, 12 days probably, and it was lovely to be here. But I've just got a feeling that when she gets back, she's either going to tell everybody or she's never going to mention it again. So we'll see what happens. Okay. Susan, lovely to see you from South Africa.
You said scratches?
Scratchings.
What? Qu'est-ce que c'est? What?
Scratching. You know when you have a pork joint?
Yeah. Is that like crackling?
Crackling, but then it's been retreated again.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, when you come over, we'll bring some. I'm pretty certain if I tried to bring any into Marrakesh, I wouldn't get through customs. Okay? No, they probably wouldn't let me through customs.
It's pork, so I wouldn't touch it. But I just wanted to make sure. It sounds like what we call crackling. There's another name that we have, but it's I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's like trying to explain beef jerky to an Englishman.
You guys don't you don't have beef jerky?
No.
We have American something you can get in supermarkets now. It comes from America that nobody eats very
much. Okay.
It's only because we've got a lot of Americans living here. They sell it, I've decided.
I know we got a lot of Americans living here, and sometimes I'm like, that's a joke.
Well, David, it's lovely to see you. Well done. So I'm just going to move over now to Keith, who's going to tell you a proper English traditional story, I hope, or maybe not, as the case may be. Keith from Lincolnshire.
Well, there we go. So, well, there was a young man called Jack, and he lived with his mother and father at the edge of a wood. And his father was a woodcutter. And he was very good at teaching Jack the right thing. And he says, Jack, always be honest, always tell the truth, and be kind to everyone. Well, after a while, Jack's father died. And so he was living with his mother in that cottage in the woodlands. Now, they lived in a kingdom that was very wide, and in the middle of the kingdom there was a sea, and in the middle of the sea there was an island. And in the middle of that island there lived a giant who was 14 feet high And the king and the queen, they ruled the land, and the king just wanted to get rid of this giant because this giant kept striding across the sea and stealing all the sheep and the goats and the cattle. And he called knights to try and get rid of this giant and magicians, but nobody could get rid of this giant because this giant had no heart. Now, the king was out riding one day and he fell off his horse and was killed. And so the queen was left to rule the kingdom, and she had a 2-year-old daughter. And one day she left a child to play just outside the castle while she went into the kitchen to organize things. And when she came out, the little girl had disappeared. And she learned that it was this giant that had strode over the sea and kidnapped this little girl and took her back to the island. And she was distraught, and again there was no knights or magicians that could rescue this little girl. And then there was a visitor that came to the castle. There's a lady, an old lady, a henwife that was selling eggs. And she wanted to sell eggs to the people in the castle and to the queen. And she said, yes, I'll buy your eggs. And this old lady said to the queen, so you don't look very happy. I know you've lost your husband, the king. No, she said, my little daughter, 2-year-old daughter, has been kidnapped by the big giant that lives in the island in the middle of the sea. And the henwife said, well, I think I might be able to help you. And out of her pinny, she took 2 bottles. And she gave them to the queen. She said, now, in the first bottle, if you smear the contents of the paste out of that bottle over your face and your body, you will turn very ugly. But out of the second bottle, if you put the paste onto yourself, you will turn back to being very beautiful. And this old lady said, now, this is what you must do. You must go throughout the kingdom. After you put this paste from the first bottle over you and turn very ugly, and take with you a bag of gold. And shake the gold as you ask the question of people, aren't I beautiful? Aren't I lovely? And of course, the men saw this ugly, ugly woman and said, oh yes, you're beautiful, hoping that she would give them some of the gold in the bag that she had with her. Well, this went on for quite a while, and one day it's getting towards the end of the day, and she looked through the trees and she could see this light. And she went up to the light, and it was a light in a cottage window. And she knocked on the door, and the lady opened the door and said that the ugly queen said, well, it's getting late in day. Could I stay here the night? And the lady said, yes, you're very welcome. Come in. And as the ugly queen went in, over and across there, sitting beside the fire, was Jack. And he got up immediately and he said, come and sit beside the fire. And the lady, she made some supper, and the ugly queen and Jack had a lovely supper. And then the ugly queen turned to Jack and said, aren't I beautiful? Shaking the bag of gold. But Jack, who was honest, said, no, you're ugly, you're awful. Oh, you're ugly, ugly old crone, with a long pointed nose down to your chin and hair that hangs down like black snakes and dotted red eyes. Oh, you're ugly. And the ugly queen says, well, I am actually the queen of this kingdom. And Jack was amazed and knelt down. And the queen told Jack that her 2-year-old daughter had been kidnapped by this giant in the middle of the sea that lived in this island in the middle of the sea. And nobody seems to be able to get my daughter back. And so Jack, he volunteered, I will go and rescue your daughter. And so the next morning he set off. His mother had made some bannock, some bread and cheese for his snack on his way. And he walked along. He sat down just beside the sea and he started to have his snack. And then what should swim up but was a white swan. And he gave the swan some little bits of bread and cheese, and the swan spoke to him and said, "Hello, young man. Where are you off to? What are you doing?" And Jack said, "Well, I'm going across to the island to rescue the Queen's daughter." And the swan said, "Don't you realise that the Queen's daughter has been held by the giant that has no heart?" Yes, I know, but I think I can overcome him. Well, the swan said, "Well, I think I can help you here, because when you go over to the island, go and find my nest. And in my nest, there's an egg. And in that egg is the heart of the giant. And so when you take hold of it, you'll have control over the giant." And with that, the swan swam away. And so Jack, he went down the coast and he found a fisherman. And after a little while, they discussed about borrowing a boat. And the fisherman said, "I'm not coming with you. I'm not coming over to that island, but you can borrow my boat." And so Jack, he rowed across the sea. He searched around on the seashore and he found the swan's nest with an egg in it. And he picked up the egg. And then over, across the other side of the island, came the giant. "What are you doing here?" And Jack said, "Well, you have the daughter of the Queen, and I've come to rescue and take her back." "I'll eat you alive, I'll eat you alive," said the giant. But Jack, he took hold of the egg and he tightened it and tightened it and tightened it. And the giant's held his chest and said, "Oh, don't, stop that, don't do that. And Jack said, "Take the little girl, the daughter of the ugly Queen, back to the Queen." All right, said the giant. And so he picked up the little girl and he strode across the sea and he returned the little child to her mother. And on his way back across the sea, striding across the sea, Jack squeezed the egg more and he threw it down the ground and smashed the egg. And as a result, the giant died. He died and sank right down into the sea and was no more. Now Jack returned to the castle and the Queen, and there's a great celebration that the daughter of the Queen had been restored and that she was ugly. And she said, "Jack, come and stay with me. Come and stay with me. We'll have a big party and I can give you lots of gold and silver and everything." And Jack said, No, I want to go back to my mother in a cottage. And the Queen said, "Well, wait here." And she went off back to her bedroom and she took the second bottle and she took out the cream that was in that second bottle and smeared it over herself, over her face and over her body, and she became very, very beautiful. And she went back to the castle and to where Jack was sitting and said, "I am the Queen." And Jack was amazed. "You're so beautiful." He was telling the truth again. He was, "Oh, I don't want silver and gold. I want you as my wife." And he threw his arm around the Queen. And so the Queen, now a beautiful Queen, was married to Jack. And they ruled the kingdom with honesty and with truthfulness. And that's the story of the ugly Queen.
Oh, thank you very much, Keith. I'm just collecting Jack stories at the moment. That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'll add to that to my.
It's a Duncan Williamson one, if you're
Yeah.
interested.
I know. I think it's in his book. If it's not, I have heard it, but I've never heard your version, and it was a good story, well told. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Right, Baba,
Yes.
scratching.
Oh,
Go on,
story.
tell us
Oh.
about.
I have a story, yes. But when Keith said the giant was heartless, I said, oh, he's a politician? But that's another story.
Yeah.
So, okay, I am blessed to work with some wonderful, actually, I can't call it work, but to work with some wonderful children, Watoto Wazuri, beautiful children. And one of the teachers that I co-teach with is also a storyteller. I think she's a grand storyteller. She insists that I'm the grand storyteller. So I told her we're both tellers of tales. But her name is Mama Aliyah Bowie. And Mama Aliyah Bowie told me a story that has been told in India, parts of Asia, throughout Africa, and here in the United States. So I'm going to kind of combine different elements because I want to tell the story. And you may have heard me tell the story before, Mike. I want to tell the story about the deer mouse. That's neither a deer nor a mouse. And why it's called a deer mouse, people can't quite say. Now, I've looked at pictures of deer mouses, and they kind of look like a mouse on the legs of a deer. Maybe that's where they get their name, deer mouse. Well, a long time ago, when Mike's beard was black, or was it red?
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Okay. And we both had hair. Long before that is when this story was told. You see, one day the deer mouse was minding its business, which it usually did, and it was just walking around throughout the jungle or the forest, and it was minding its business and having a nice time. And it was lost in thought and wasn't really paying much attention to where it was going until it fell into a deep hole. That's my sound of it falling through the air. And it fell into a hole. And the deer mouse looked up and up and up and up, but the hole was too big for the deer mouse to jump out of. But just behind the deer mouse fell a lone leaf. And the deer mouse picked up the leaf and looked at it. And the deer mouse was pondering how it was going to get out of the hole. Well, around that time came a leopard. And now in the Indian version, it's a tiger, but came a leopard. And the leopard could hear the deer mouse walking around, and he looked down in the hole and said, "What are you doing down there? I mean, why are you down there? I mean, you look kind of stupid. Why are you down in this hole?" And the deer mouse said, oh, the world's about to end. And this is the only safe to be. So I came down here. So when the world ends, I will survive. And the leopard said, oh, the world's about to end? The world's about to end? And so the leopard, without thinking, jumped down into the hole. I don't know what the sound of, but that's him falling through the air. And the hole was too deep for the leopard to jump out of. And so the leopard was saying, I guess we're safe in the hole. The deer mouse said, yes, as long as you don't sneeze. What? Well, if you sneeze, we have to put you out of the hole. So don't sneeze. And the deer mouse accidentally tickled the nose of the leopard. Well, that was close. So we're safe as long as we're down here, because when the world ends, we'll be safe. Well, there came along a zebra, or as my British friends would say, a zebra. But I'm not British, so it was a zebra. Well, the zebra came along and looked down the hole and saw a leopard and a deer mouse. And the zebra's wondering, well, why isn't a leopard eating the deer mouse? And why is the deer mouse being so friendly with the leopard? And what is he doing with that leaf? And so the zebra looked down and said, excuse me, why are the two of you down there in the bottom of this rather deep hole? And the deer mouse said, oh, well, but see, the world's about to end, and the only place to be safe is down here in the hole. So the leopard joined me, and we're down the hole. So when the world ends, we'll be okay. And the zebra said, oh, well, I don't want to be, I'm going to join you. And so it jumped down into the hole. Now you had a leopard, you had a zebra, and you had a deer mouse, that's neither a deer nor a mouse, in the bottom of this deep hole. And the leopard said, but you got to be very careful. You can't sneeze. Well, why is that? Because if you sneeze, we have to throw you out of the hole. Well, I shan't sneeze. So now they're down there, and the leopard's looking at the zebra, and the leopard is thinking, I think I'm going to have the zebra for dinner, and the deer mouse, that's neither a mouse nor a deer, for dessert. So they heard this thumping, and the ground was shaking, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And so the zebra thought, it's the end of the world. And the leopard thought, it's the end of the world. And the deer mouse, that's neither a deer nor a mouse, thought, what's going on? And after a while, they saw a great big head with great big ears and a long, long trunk and tusk looking down in the hole. And it said, what are you guys doing down in that hole? It was an elephant. Or as my nephew would have said when he was a little one, an elephant. It was an elephant. Well, why are you down there? And so the deer mouse said, because the world's about to end, and the only safe place to be is down here in the hole. And the elephant thought, well, I don't want to die. I'm going to join you. And without second thought, the elephant jumped and fell down to the hole, just barely missing landing on any of the people already down there. And the ground shook, and the hole shook, and the green grass grew all around and around. Oh, no, that's another story. Well, the elephant looked around, and the zebra said, actually, don't sneeze. If you sneeze, we have to throw you out of the hole. Why is that? Because if you sneeze, you got to go. Well, I won't sneeze. I won't sneeze. And so they're talking, but now all this dust is up in the air. And the deer mouse, that's neither a deer nor a mouse, has this little leaf and tickles its own nose and goes, achoo! And they all look at him, and the elephant said, no, you got to go. And the elephant used his trunk, grabbed the deer mouse, swung him around and around and around and up and up and up and up out of the hole. And the deer mouse landed near the edge of the hole. And the deer mouse looked down at the leopard, who was looking at the zebra like he was hungry, and looking at the elephant said, don't even think it. And they looked at each other, and the deer mouse said, I got to go. See you around sometime, fellas. And he left. Now, I don't know if the leopard ever ate the zebra, or if the elephant ever pounded the leopard, or if they're even still in that hole. But I do know this. Leopards are powerful and fast. Zebras are fast, and they're either black with white stripes or white with black stripes, and it really doesn't matter. And elephants, well, they're not afraid of either of them. And they're in the hole. But the meekest and weakest of all those animals was also the brightest and the smartest, which proves that you may have physical prowess, but often in life it's not how strong you are of body, it's how strong you are of mind that will get you out of problems. And I guess you could say that's the whole of the story. See what I did there?
Right. I've only got two comments to make about that story. Right. It was obviously a zebra by its accent. Because if it was an English zebra, it would talk like that, or just like the one in your story. but it wasn't a zebra then, it was a zebra. And that was the end of that. And it wasn't and the elephant didn't come from the British Isles because our local elephants are called heffalumps.
Heffalumps.
Heffalumps, yeah. We
Ooh.
call them heffalumps, yeah. And we've got loads of them. They hide in the woods and things. You don't see them very often, but they hang around here. Okay.
Okay.
And you know what
Everybody
they
knows.
say about heffalumps?
What do they say?
Half a lump is better than none.
Yeah, I knew you were going to go there.
Oh.
That is bad. That is bad. You know.
Yeah, okay. And there's sometime when we're sat in a pub and we're not online, I'll tell you the other version of that story that you've just told.
All right.
But it's got to do with a BMW. It's the same story though, pretty much. Right. So we're going to go to John. I don't know if he can sort out a poem.
One last thing. That elephant would later go on. That elephant would later go on and help found a very prestigious college called the Tuskegee Institute.
Right. Someone mute him. Okay.
I'll mute myself.
Right. So before John, we get started. So Norman, you're going to tell a story. Sue from South Africa. I haven't seen you for a bit. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Yes, absolutely. And David, I haven't seen you for a while either. Give me a wave. Give me a wave. Right. If you're very welcome, you two, to tell a story if you want to. But we're going to go to John next, and then Norman if he would like to. Okay. John, you're muted, my friend.
Yeah, I'm unmuting myself. I'm
Right.
just getting. I thought I'd do a couple of poems.
Oh, it's Omar. Oh, great.
Right. So there's a lot of talk at the moment about the definition of Englishness, etc. So I wrote this ages ago. It's called My England. This is my England. The Jews in Brent Cross Tesco's, my East European dentist in Finchley Road giving me my smile back, the Hindu temple in Kingsbury, where I wait for hours for my brother-in-law's coach to arrive from Romania, Kingsbury High Street, with its shops full of bursting with fresh fruit, vegetables, its hardware stores, banks and butchers, where shopkeepers ask their customers which language they speak and are answered by people who might be expected by the look to speak Arabic or some subcontinental tongue with French and English. Kingsbury, where an old white English lady taking a stroll in the park with a Chinese friend asks if they can join me on the park bench where they discuss an overseas visitor's sightseeing tour. Meanwhile, in the Shires, they bemoan the demise of the high street and how nothing is the same anymore. And I'm going to go on. Takes me a second. And wrote this in Algiers. And it's the first time I've been in North Africa since 1968, but I did about 20 years, no, about 10 years ago in Algiers. And just a set of visual stuff, I suppose. This coast could have graced any of 100 Hollywood films. Its sea dotted with freighters and a shoreline, one North African urban sprawl, rising terrace after terrace towards the sky, modern in the extreme, even the old stuff. It challenges Europeans who think straight lines, right angles, abstractions came with the Cubists and Mondrian. The stray dog, loping with its ribs jutting across the wasteland, would have given some comfort. But it is the monument to the martyrs that dominates the skyline and reminds me it was here. My American literature professor stood on a runway 40 years ago to meet Eldridge Cleaver, who lived in the city in self-imposed exile. How Fanon helped change the thinking of a generation, and as if to confirm my thoughts, now in the second decade of the 21st century, the book fair is packed with tens and thousands of visitors and its volumes stacked head high, where I'm left humbled by the intensity of my audience. They listen to me jabber on in an alien tongue they are determined to conquer. As I leave, An official at the airport asks if I have anything to declare. When I answer nothing, he replies, "Nothing but your good health. Please come and visit us again." I correct myself and declare my good health and wonder where north of the Mediterranean I could have had such a conversation. And I'll finish on a last one. God. Right, here we go. And this called Musical Roots. Because a few of us here were born before rock and roll. Somewhere between the Cecil Sharp songbook and the Delta, I loved Shannon's daughter, said farewell to the Red River Valley, left little girl in Kingston Town, jogged through Oklahoma in a Surrey with the fringe on top, toted ripe bananas in Jamaica while avoiding the highly deadly black tarantula, waltzed my way through Strauss's Vienna and watched toreadors fighting against their foes in Carmen, Spain. Once a year, there were concerts on the radio by my mother's favorite songsters, Bing Crosby, Harry Belafonte, and Paul Robeson, who I learned was not allowed to leave America because he was a communist. These were punctuation marks like Christmas, Easter, birthdays, the last night of the proms and the Scouts jumble sale and Bobber Job Week, and the man on his bicycle who sharpened knives and garden shears. Meanwhile, we junior school children became Alabama bound on the Rock Island line and caught the last train to San Fernando before progressing to grammar school and eventually Long Trousers, where we journeyed to North Alaska, the land of the midnight sun. By the time I left for art school, I knew all about the Battle of New Orleans, powdering gators behind, how the British kept coming, and wondered why I failed geography at O-level.
Lovely, John. I always love listening to your stuff. I really do. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Right, so we're going to go to Norman.
Quicker than I thought. So, well, I'm ready. Anyways, it's funny about the story of Mouse Deer. He's Indonesian and he's known as
Deer mouse. There's
What?
a difference. Deer mouse, because there is a mouse deer. Deer mouse, which is
Deer
neither
mouse. Okay. Well, the there are stories about him, and one of the more clever ones that I rather like is the about they try to show the size of something, and they say a tooth, and he shows anyways. I've forgotten what the thing is. I'm telling another story called Jack and the Old Woman of the Woods. I've told this story before, but this is the time of year for telling this particular story. And it has a story of the story. Years ago, I learned it from Celia Lottridge, and I liked it so much, I learned it to tell. And then one Friday night, I told it, and I asked, I told it, and Marilyn Perringer came over to me and said, "Oh, Norman, I've been looking for that story. I don't know what the source of it. It's in a book in French, and I can't find it anymore." And "Where did you get the story?" And I said, "I got it from Celia." And oh, so she went over to Celia and says, "Celia, I've been looking for that story that Norman just told. Where did you get it?" And said, "Oh, I got it from Ray Gordetsky on that trip to Sudbury a couple years back." And poor Marilyn's face fell because she had told it, the bare bones of it, just the outline, to Ray Gordetsky, and she still didn't know the source of the story. And I will tell you the source of the story once I've told it. Jack lived on Black Bay Road up in the Ottawa Valley. And he was one of the laziest boys that you'd ever met. Now, he had lost his father in the Great War, so he lived alone with his mother. And every morning when they got up to do the work on the farm, cutting wood, drawing water, cleaning the stables, Jack got up, meaning to do all the work. And so, but when his mother came to the stairwell and went, bam, 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 daylight in the swamp, Jack. Time to go to work. Jack meant to work, but he went downstairs to the kitchen and he ate the breakfast his mother laid down of coffee and toast and oatmeal. And he meant to go out and clean out the stables, the first chore in the morning. But when he picked up the big pitchfork and went into the stable, the smell of what was piled up behind those cows was just too much for him. And so he put the pitchfork down and went into the forest where the air was sweet and clean and clear. And he liked picking berries, and so he would often do that. His mother ended up doing all the work. Now, one morning of the story, there was the same as always. Bam, 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 bam. Daylight in the swamp, Jack. Time to work. And Jack would go down and eat the breakfast, toast and coffee and oatmeal. And he went out into the barn. He picked up the pitchfork. And as soon as he saw it was piled up behind those cows, because it was there every day, regular as clockwork, something I remember myself very well. Regular as clockwork, he just put the pitchfork down and he went into the forest and he knew that the blueberries were in season, so he went to go picking blueberries. And as usual, his mother ended up doing all the work. And so Jack took the berry pail and he walked into the woods and he walked down the pathway to the place where he knew the best blueberries were. And he began to pick the blueberries. Now, as he was picking the berries, Jack heard a strange sound. It seemed to come from a bird off in the distance. Now, Jack thought he knew every single bird in the forest. He knew what they looked like and where they lived. But this particular sound he had never heard before. And it went off kind of a trilling sound. Ta-da-ta-da, ta-da-ta-da. And Jack put down his pail and he followed that sound, for it seemed to be coming from an old dead pine tree. And as he walked towards the dead pine tree, the sound of that bird was from further away. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da. And so he went deeper and deeper into the forest, following that strange sound of the bird. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And so he forgot where he was going. And so he went deeper and deeper into the forest. And what's more, not only did he go deeper into the forest, it was getting darker and he didn't see that. And then he didn't see the clouds coming over as he followed the sound of that bird. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, when suddenly, crack! A flash of lightning, a roll of thunder, and the rain came tumbling down. And the rain came down, and Jack forgot all about that bird. He was, because now the rain was coming down so hard and so heavy that he was soaked and wet to the skin. And he was, what's more, even worse, he was lost. He'd forgotten completely where he was. And as I said, he knew exactly where he was most of the time. But now all he could hear was the sound of thunder. And he didn't even hear that bird. He just was getting wetter and wetter and wetter as thunder rolled and the sky got dark until at last the sun fell and it was nighttime. And now Jack was cold, wet, and miserable and in the woods lost. And so he stumbled through the darkness looking for light, when suddenly he saw a light off in the distance. And when he saw the light, he was so happy, because where there's light, there's people. Where there's people, there's shelter. And where there's shelter, there's fire and warmth. And more than anything else in the whole wide world, Jack wanted to get warm and dry. And so he came to a clearing. And in the middle of the clearing, there was an old log cabin, the sort of log cabin that's all through the Ottawa Valley, even to this very day. And he saw that there was light coming from a window, so it meant there was a fire. And so he came up to the door and he was about to knock on the door, but before he could even knock on the door just opened by itself. And the door opened to reveal a fireplace with a warm fire crackling in it. Off to one side, he could see a bed, and on top of the bed, there was a quilt. And on the other side of the fireplace, there was this little old lady, a little old lady who just sat there, rocking back and forth, back and forth. And then she stopped and he said, she looked at Jack and he says, "Hey, Jack, you're cold and wet and miserable. Why don't you come in and warm yourself by my fire?" Now, Jack didn't need to be asked twice. He wondered how she knew his name, but you know, they're always named Jack in these stories, aren't they? And so he jumped across the threshold and he ran over to that fireplace and he stood in front of the roaring fire, and soon he was steaming one side, and he turned over and he steaming on the other side, and he turned again and again, steaming all around. Meanwhile, the old woman sat in a rocking chair, quiet and simple, just rocking back and forth, back and forth. And then suddenly she stopped. And then she said, "Hey, Jack, what? You look like you're cold and wet. Why don't you take off those wet shoes of yours and put them by the fire to warm a bit?" And Jack thought that was a good idea. So he took off his shoes. And the old woman got up from the chair and she picked up the shoes and put them by the fire. And so Jack stood by the fire, and fire crackling away, and the old woman sitting in a rocking chair, rocking back and forth, back and forth. And she stopped. And she said, "Hey, Jack, why don't you take off that wet shirt of yours, and I'll put it by the fire so you can dry out a bit." And that seemed like a good idea, too. And so Jack took off his wet shirt and she went across the room. She took the shirt, she shook it out. She folded it up and she put it on top of the pool on the shoes in the middle of the room. And she went back to the rocking chair to rock back and forth, back and forth. Meanwhile, Jack was still turning around, steaming and warming himself up when she suddenly stopped again. And then she said, "Jack, Jack, why don't you give me the wet trousers?" Now, Jack was stood there in his long underwear, but he said, "Okay." So he took off the wet trousers. She took the trousers, she shook them out, she folded them up, put it on top of the pile in the middle of the room, and she went back to her rocking chair to rock back and forth, back and forth. And she stopped, said, "Jack, Jack, why don't you take off the long." And Jack didn't need to be asked twice. He suddenly went over to the quilt, jumped underneath the quilt, and took off the long underwear and threw the long underwear across the room. And they went flying, flapping across the room, and she caught them in one hand. And she shook out the long underwear and she folded it up and put it on top of the pile in the middle of the room, and she went back to the rocking chair to rock back and forth, back and forth. Well, Jack was warming up underneath the quilt, and then she said, "Jack, Jack, give me your skin." And Jack had to take off the skin, and it slid off of him, off underneath the blanket and onto the floor. And she got up and she went and picked up Jack's skin lying there on the floor. And she shook Jack's skin out. And then she smoothed out the wrinkles. And then she folded it up as best as she could. And then she put on top of the pile in the middle of the room. And she went back to the rocking chair to rock back and forth, back and forth. And she said, "Jack, Jack, Jack, give me your flesh." And Jack gave her his flesh. She took the flesh and folded it up as best as she could, and she took that folded up flesh, put it on top of the pile of the middle of the room, and then she went back to the rocking chair to rock back and forth, back and forth. And then she said, Jack. She stopped and she said, Jack, give me your bones. And Jack took her bones off. Click, 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 click. And the old woman went over and she took the bones from Jack, all of them, every single one of them, and she carried them over to the pile in the middle of the room, and she put the bones on top of the pile one by one, and then on the very top, facing the fire, was the skull facing the fireplace, and the fire glittered in the hollows of Jack's skull as the old woman went back to the sit and rock, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until the old woman fell asleep. So Jack fell asleep too. What there was of him, I like to think of it as the essential Jack. And so Jack slept that night, and the old woman slept all that night. And in the morning, the storm had finished. The sun was shining through the open window, and the birds were singing in the woods. And Jack woke up and he looked out, and the old woman was still in her rocking chair. But she wasn't rocking back and forth. She was still fast asleep. And so Jack very, very quietly got up and went across the room. And I can't tell you how quiet he was. The old woman was still sleeping. And so Jack took his bones and he put them into place. Click, 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 clickety click. And then he put his skull on top of his head and went click. The old woman was still asleep. And so Jack took his skin and put it on, and it fit, his flesh, and he put his flesh on and into place and slap, 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 slappity, slap. The old woman was still asleep. And Jack took his skin and he put it on, and it fitted him like, well, of course, the skin. And then Jack took his shirt, his jeans, his long underwear, and he put it on very carefully. And last was his shoes. And he put one shoe and the other shoe on, and the old woman was still asleep. And Jack went running. He ran out of that room and out into the woods. And he ran and he ran and he ran and he ran until he ran out of breath. And there he was, stood there panting, and he realized he knew where he was. He was on the laneway that led to his own farm. And there was his barn. And so he ran up to the barn and ran right into the barn, and he grabbed hold of that pitchfork, and he cleaned out the stable behind those the cows until they were clean as a whistle. And then he took enough water. He almost drowned those poor cows, filling their water trough, and then enough hay to feed them for a month. And then when he had done that, he ran into the woodshed and he loaded with wood, enough to carry enough wood for a day or two, it seemed. He staggered into the porch and into the kitchen, and he opened up the door somehow, and he dumped all that wood right beside the stove. And there was his mother. She was just standing there, putting down his breakfast, porridge and coffee and toast. She didn't ask him where he'd been all night. She didn't say anything at all. She just laid down that food, and Jack sat down, and he was famished. As if he had never eaten in his life before. And as he was eating the toast and the coffee and the porridge, his mother went past the stove. She picked up her knitting. She went to sit in the rocking chair that was always by the kitchen stove, and she began to knit and to rock back and forth, back and forth. And she looked at Jack and she smiled. And from that day, Jack was the hardest working lad in Blackbay Road, if not the whole Ottawa Valley. And that's the story of Jack and the Old Woman of the Woods. And when I was in Montreal a few years ago, finally I was asked a librarian about this story, and he says, I know that story. And he told me. And now I've just told it to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, Jack and the Old Woman of the Woods. Brilliant. Good story, well told. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to Sue. Are you doing one today, Sue? Or you shake your head or nod your head or say hello?
I just say hi, and no, I'm not. I miss you guys, but you've all been so busy with your storytelling festivals and things like that. There hasn't been much happening. So I'm glad
Yeah,
you're
that's quite
back.
right. We've had some. We're all back, and it's going to be once. It's bi-weekly now, all through the winter. So
Yeah,
at 6 o'clock UK time, we're just going to be here. And it will slowly build up like it is before. We just get some consistency into it.
yeah,
The summer times are always a bit more difficult, but John and I and Omar and Waleed and everybody else, we've all agreed that this is what's going to happen. So we'll take it on. Okay.
yeah. Okay, good to see everybody.
You're well done. Lovely to see you here all the way from South Africa. Absolutely lovely.
Hey, Mike.
Right. David, I can't see you. I think you can hear me. And Omar was here, but he's left again. So oh, there he is. Hello, David. I can't hear you, my friend, but oh. No, David, I can't hear you. You're not muted, but I don't know if your volume's down. Right. I still can't see you. I still can't hear you, my friend. Something wrong somewhere. Anyway, so I think,
Mike,
yeah,
may I share a quick personal story? It just
absolutely you can.
Hold on. I think if David unplugs his earphones, that might be why it's stopping.
All right, okay, go on.
Pulls the earphone bit out of the computer.
Try that. Right. Oh, there you go. Yeah, right. It's always very well. It's always lovely to see you here, David. And please come along in 2 weeks' time, and we can sit and do it. And we'll have other stories here, like we always do. It's always a pleasure to have you sat here with us. Okay. All put your thumb up for David. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, Baba, you're going to tell us a quick.
Yeah, a quick personal story, because
Go on.
someone was talking, it may have been you, and it just kind of like crystallized in my head. So many years ago, my family was host to a young man from Germany. We were going through some strange stuff here in the United States, as per usual, and he had been with 2 or 3 different host families, and they did not want him to speak German, even when he called home to talk to his family. So anyhow, he wound up staying with us, and to this day, I still call him my brother. And he fell in love with my parents, and he loved to travel, particularly with my father. So one day, he and my father were down at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library, which basically is the central library in Washington, D.C. But when they opened the Martin Luther King Jr. Library, they closed the central library because they didn't want black folk in it. But that's another story. So my father and this young German, very blonde, I mean, if he'd been any, well, very blonde, and they're down in the main vestibule of the Martin Luther King Jr. Library. And so he turns to my father to ask a question. He goes, "Daddy." Now, this blonde German kid and my father, who's like 3 shades darker than I am, he goes, "Daddy." And my father goes, "What?" And my father speaks a little German, so they go back and forth. And so there were some people in the lobby who knew my father and knew my mom and knew my mom didn't play that. And they said, "Calendar," because my father told my brother what he was looking for, and he says, "I don't mean to. I don't Calendar. Did he just call you Daddy? I mean, I know you do a lot of things, but did he just call you Daddy?" And my father said yes, and gave no further explanation. We left it at that. Okay, I had to tell you that story because many years later, I had a youth group called Tomorrow's Voices, and they were storytellers, drummers, performers, spoken word artists in training. And so there were a group of us at a very popular mall in Washington, D.C. And I would take them places and I would say, "Okay, guys, you got 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, you got to be here. If you're not here in 10 minutes, I'm gone. And you get home the best you can." All right. So my group was very mixed. I had Latinos, I had Africans, I had African Americans, and I had this one blonde kid who was with us almost every weekend. And I loved him dearly. So we're in the mall. I'm at one end of the mall. He's at the other end. And he looks up and sees a store he wants to go into. And he shouts, "Dad!" And I go, "Son!" He goes, "Dad, do I have time to go in here?" I said, "You got 10 minutes. Now, I'm very well known in Washington, D.C. And when this little blonde boy turned around and shouted, "Dad!" across the courtyard, the place got quiet. It was like one of those moments in a movie. And then this guy says, Baba C, did that little boy just call you Daddy?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Is that your son?" I said, "Ask him." So he said, "Did you just call Baba C Dad?" He said, "Yes." "Is that your father?" He said, "Yes." "Is there a problem?" And thankfully, the gentleman, I'm being kind, got quiet. And he just looked at the little blonde kid and looked at me, looked at the little blonde kid and looked at me. And about that time, 2 Asian kids, 3 Latino kids, African American kids, and some African kids all joined and said, "Dad, we're done." And he just looked. He never said anything and walked away. I tell this story because the United States is going through some changes again. And it just got me that whatever it is, calling or adopting other sons, I got honestly. My father did it with our host brother from Germany, and I've been doing it without thinking about it, and usually pay it no mind until somebody less enlightened takes issue with kids that don't look like me, calling me Dad, Baba, Poppy, and some other things. Anyhow, I just wanted to share that story because it touches me to this day. And I hope you guys got something out of that, but that's a personal story I wish to share. I'm done.
So that's a lovely story, but I'm going to share this one with you because it's in the same ilk. So where we adopted our son, Jake. So Jake was, for all sorts of different reasons, he came to us when he was about 18 months old. and he looked like Mowgli out of the Jungle Book. That's what he was usually reminded, like a little stick boy. Anyway, so we had a problem, you see, because Anna, we're of the Christian faith. We're not particularly Christian, you know, but we are of the Christian faith, and Anna was christened. Now, when it came to christening Jake, we couldn't christen Jake because he was a Muslim, basically. So we said, well, we can't change his religion and everything else. So we sat in the pub with a bunch of friends of ours, and Adele turned around and says, well, I'll be his folk mother. It's the same as a godmother. What does a godmother have to do? Well, you have to buy a present for his birthday, you have to buy a present for Christmas, and you have to take him out once a year all by himself. She said, well, I'll do that, she said. And so we had the equivalent of a hand fasting, and Adele became Jake's godmother, or folk mother. Anyway, it was all working out really well. Every Christmas, he got a present. Every birthday, he got a present. And he got up to about 7 or 8 years old. And Adele went, who was single, by the way. She was never married. And she had a boyfriend from time to time. She didn't have any children herself. And she was a school teacher. She was a very good English teacher. So she came to the school holidays. So she got in contact with, probably wrote a letter in my days. And she said, oh, turn up Thursday morning and I'll take him out. It'll be just Adele and Jake and me, and we'll have a day out together. And we said, fine. So Adele turns up. So Jake's all there with his bag and everything else. Now he's really looking forward to it. You know, this is a day out just for him and not with his older sister and his mum and dad and everything else. And so I said, where are you going, Adele? And she said, Alton Towers. Now, Alton Towers is the equivalent, Bob, of taking someone to Disneyland. Right? You can drive it's about an hour and a half drive away, but it's the biggest theme park we've got in the whole of the UK. Right? For us, it's a one in a lifetime trip. You don't go there on holidays. So Adele goes, I'll take him to Alton Towers. Can't think of anything else to do. And off he went to Alton Towers. Now she did that about 5 or 6 times in a row. And it's the only time that I know anybody who goes to Alton Towers once on an annual basis, you know, or something along those lines. And Adele did that until Jake was 21. When he was 21, he turned around. She said, after 21, I don't have to do this anymore. And they wouldn't have had a meal together. And they still kept in contact. And very sadly, Adele died about 9 months ago. And Jake turned up at the funeral. And all was good, as they say. I'm going to finish it like that. All was good. Okay. And so my wife, Lynn, she's got 3 or 4 different people for various reasons. They call her mum. Okay. Basically, when they were growing up as teenagers, I think she fed most of them. For one reason. That might have had something to do with it. But when we went to a festival, I take the caravan along and everything else. And I call them molehills when the kids were teenagers. These little pop tents would turn up all around our tent, all around where we were. At one point, there was half a dozen of them. And they'd all wake up in the morning and they all looked hungry. So we always feed them. So I think that's had something to do with it. Anyways, I'm happy to.
While we're on personal stories, I'm not going to tell one, but I'm going to mention that next Saturday, yes, the 25th, 1:30 UK time is 1:30 p.m. That is. Rachel Smith is hosting another personal story session.
No, I did it last year myself, and I'm going to be there to listen if I possibly can. It's always interesting. And Rachel and Nicaragua, who I met in Marrakesh for the first time, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but when I see her, she can have another go. And Johnny, it's just the way Rachel in particular has a real good way of telling personal stories. I'm really impressed with what she does. Right. I'm going to call it tonight. Thank you for coming. I'll see you here in a fortnight's time, 6 o'clock UK time. John, you take care. I expect you to be back in the UK at some point in the near future.
Yes, I will be. I'm only over here for a week. But I will mention that next Friday, we have one of our young tellers doing the Friday session, and that's Jasname from Punjab is doing the Friday session. I shall be in the air, so Babasi is going to be me because we kind of look similar.
We kind of
Right,
look
well,
like
what
Rich
time's
Man.
that? What time's that?
Six usual 6 o'clock Friday session.
Right. Okay. I'll see if I can make it. I'll see what I'm doing. Okay, if you're not about. Okay. Well, I'm going to call it tonight. Thank you for coming. It's been a wonderful session. See you in a fortnight's time. And I'm going to press the button that says I lead the meeting. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you, Waleed, for flying the magic carpet. Right. Bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Everybody
Thank
be
you.
a great
Bye.
day. C